So we are going to look at the difference between Preteritum and imperfekt, or sorry, perfekt und we're going to start this over again because the imperfect is das Preteritum. Boom. All right. So, das Perfekt und das Preteritum. Those are the two kinds of past tense in German. We've seen them both already, but this is another look at them just for the sake of review and all that stuff. So, das Perfekt is the two-word version of the past tense that we've seen. That's, for example, hat gemacht, so has made, ist gereist, has traveled, hat gesehen, has seen. And then das Preteritum is the one-word version of the past, so machte or made, reiste, traveled, sah, saw. That one's very similar to the English. There's not a real big distinction in their meaning, you know. It feels a little different to say I have traveled or I traveled. And maybe in certain contexts that can have a slight distinction in meaning. But for the most part, in German, the meanings are the same. It's just that you use them in different contexts, okay? So the perfect is used generally for spoken situations, like if you're just having a conversation with someone. There are some exceptions to that. Regionally, some regions use the preteritum in spoken, but also in a lot of places in most places across Germany, they'll use the preteritum version of haben, so had instead of have had. They'll use the preteritum version of sein, so was instead of had been or has been or something like that. And then all modal verbs in spoken German are used in the preterite forms instead of their perfect forms, which makes sense because then you can just have the modal verb in the preteritum and the infinitive at the end of the sentence. The preteritum is used in writing, whether it be newspapers or literature or I don't know what. Pretty much most forms of writing are done in the preterite. Okay. Yeah. So take a look at das Perfekt. We'll recall that, like I said, it's a two-word past tense. There are two verbal forms. There's the helping verb, which is either haben oder sein. And then there's the participle that comes at the end of the sentence. A lot of people are really struggling with that. A lot of English speakers do struggle with that, right? Because we say, I have been, right? And that verb, the participle been, comes right after the helping, right? I have been, right? So it's a bit of an adjustment to go ahead and put that participle at the end of the sentence, but that's how it works in German. In the Preteritum, there's just one verbal element, and it appears where a verb normally would in a sentence. That's in the second position. Also, ich machte meine Hausaufgabe. So take a look at these two. Ich habe, and then whatever you need in your sentence, and then gemacht. So ich habe meine Hausaufgabe gemacht. And in the preterite, it's ich machte meine Hausaufgabe. And you don't have to worry about anything at the end. Ich bin letztes Jahr nach Deutschland gereist. So this is an example of a verb that takes sein as a helping verb. And it functions the same, right? You conjugate the helping verb for the subject, and you have the participle all the way at the end of your sentence. So letztes Jahr Bin ich nach Deutschland gereist? Last year traveled, or if we're going to do this literally, let's do it. So last year, am I to Germany traveled? So last year I traveled to Germany. All right. So once again, helping verb in the second position, the participle in the last position. In the Preteritum, you just use the one word, and that's reiste here. So letztes Jahr reiste ich nach Deutschland, right? No participle, you don't need it. Okay, so we've just seen reiste, and that is a weak verb. These distinctions, I've said this before, I'll say it again, these distinctions between weak and strong don't have anything to do with the meanings of the verbs, but rather the different verb parts, right? So any verb has principal parts. It has the infinitive, so the infinitive for reiste is reisen, so to travel. And then it's participle, and that's what gets used for the perfect. That's just gereist. And then its preterite form, or the form in Preteritum, is reiste. And that pattern, where you take the verb stem and add a ge and a t at the end for the perfect, and take the verb stem and add a t, and then the endings, that in the Preteritum, that means that it's a weak verb, right? So weak verbs are pretty easy to form their preterite for. As long as you know that it's weak, it goes really fast, right? So reisen is reis plus te, reiste, right? So machen, we need the verb stem, which is mach, plus the te, so it's machte, right? Oh, oops. Click too fast, sorry. So Arbeit is our verb stem for arbeiten, and because the stem ends in a T, you add an extra E before the TE ending, so it's arbeitete, okay? And once again, that sort of reflects a reason why maybe this isn't spoken so much. My wife just went out the back door. So can you come up with these three, if you want to pause it for a second and think it over? Okay. So it's sagen, sagte. Did I fill this in? Let's see. No, I didn't. So sagen, sagte, fragen, fragte, reden, and you need an extra E here, redete, right? So if it ends in, I can't remember all of the letters, but if the verb stem ends in like probably in T, D, maybe Z, you need like yeah, there's a few other ones you need that extra E in there. So that was for weak verbs. For strong verbs, these are the ones where there's maybe like a vowel change in the participle and in the preterite form. You just kind of have to memorize them, okay? Yeah, and there's Bill telling you have to memorize them. So let's see what we can do here. So sehen we've seen earlier, and it sounds a lot like the English form. So sehen is the infinitive, the preterite is sah, and then you add your endings, and no extra E is thrown in there typically, right? So du sahst, you saw. Wir sahen, we saw, right? Gehen, to go, is the infinitive. The preterite is ging, so went, right? So ich ging, right? You don't add anything extra on strong verbs in the first or third person singular. So it's ich ging, du gingst, yeah? Sprechen is to speak, so sprechen is the infinitive. The Preteritum is sprach. So du sprachst, sie sprachen. So you spake or spoke, and then you formal spake or spoke. This one's a little tricky because anrufen is a separable prefix verb, so that an gets separated and kicked to the end of the sentence, right? So it would be rief an. So if I want to say I called someone, it's ich rief sie an, right? So to conjugate this for ihr, which is you informal, plural, it'd be ihr rieft an. You all called. You all, y'all. Okay, so as a reminder, these are what the conjugations look like. So for the weak verb reisen, you take the stem, you add the T, and then E in first and third, and then EST in the second person, EN, first person plural, ET, second person plural informal, and then EN for the other Z's, right? And that's for weak. For strong, the exception here is that in the first and third person singular, you basically just don't have an ending. You just take the preterite form as it comes, right? But you'll notice that in both weak and strong, in the preterite forms, first person and third person have the same endings, right? So reiste, reiste, ich reiste, reiste, ich schrieb, schrieb, stuff like that. Okay? So now I wanted to give you a chance to practice. You can pause the video, right? And then try to work through these. Which one is perfect, or which sentences are in the perfect and which ones are in the preterite, right? This is just a test of your eye, sort of getting used to these different forms. So pause it. And we're back. Okay. So, der Junge saß allein in seinem Zimmer und weinte. Well, that second one should be pretty clear. That's a TE. That's a weak verb, weinte. That looks really like preterite, right? Saß is a strong verb. The infinitive is sitzen, so that's das Preterit. Donnerstags wusch ich die Wäsche. Thursdays, I washed the laundry. Once again, well, not once again, sorry. There's only one verb form here, right? There's not two verbal forms, so you know it's going to be the preterite. And wusch represents a strong verb. It's waschen. That's the infinitive. Waschen, wusch. Okay. Was hast du an der Uni studiert? So here we have two verbal elements. Hast and studiert, right? So there's that participle, the past participle at the end. So that's the perfect. Okay. Meine Eltern haben ein Haus in München gemietet. So we see something that looks very much like a participle here, right? You have that GE at the beginning and the T at the end. Mieten is the infinitive, and that means to rent. And then you have haben, and that's what's conjugated for the subject, meine Eltern. Meine Eltern are the ones doing the action. Haben tells you, that it's conjugated for, two people. So meine Eltern haben ein Haus in München gemietet is perfekt. Okay. I will say this one feels a little bit more obvious to me. I suspect it feels a little bit more obvious to you than studiert. Studiert, its infinitive is studieren, right? And those verbs that end in ieren, in I-E-R-E-N, they don't take a GE prefix in their participles for whatever reason, right? So it doesn't look as participle-y as gemietet does. Okay. Sie wollten schon immer in Bayern wohnen. So if you recall at the top of the hour, at the top of the presentation, I said that modals get used in their preterite forms. And here we have a modal. This is wollten, and the infinitive is wollen, to want, right? So they have always wanted to live in Bayern. So while there are two verbal elements here, the second one is not a participle, but rather an infinitive. To live, wohnen. So that's preterit. Wohnen is a weak verb, and if it were in the past tense, it would be wohnte. But you wouldn't have a preterit ever with a modal verb. It's always modal verb plus the infinitive. But I just wanted to let you know that doesn't look like the past tense at all. Hast du schon den Balkon gefegt? Once again, we see a very participially looking thing. You have the GE and the T on that last word in the sentence. Have you swept the balcony? That's perfect. Heute Morgen war die Mikrowelle noch sauber. Here we only have one verbal element, and it's war, right? And that looks a lot like was, right? Just change the R to an S. It's Preteritum. Only one word, past tense. In meiner alten Wohnung hatte ich eine Spülmaschine. In my old apartment, I had a dishwasher. Only one verbal element, right? The last word in the sentence is not a participle. It's a noun in this case, right? So it's certainly not going to be the perfect. It's the preterit, right? Die ganze Familie hat Alex bei seinem Umzug geholfen. So here we see two verbal elements, hat und geholfen, and that means it's in the perfect. Geholfen is a strong verb. Its infinitive is helfen. So geholfen is its participle. In seiner neuen Wohnung konnte sehr gut schlafen. He had been able to sleep well. It's hard to translate this as past tense. He could sleep well in his old apartment. So once again, it's a modal verb, and those get used in the preterit for the most part. So it's the preterit. And schlafen is, of course, the infinitive, to sleep. Hat wirklich Glück gehabt. He had luck. Or he had luck, right? Because there's two verbal elements. Hat gehabt. Yeah? Need a drink of water. That's the perfect. Okay. So another chance for you to practice. And this is the last slide before you're set free. So what we have is sentences with blanks. You need to fill them in as if this were a spoken conversation. So remember, I say in speech, the perfect is used almost all the time, unless it's sein, haben, or modal verbs. And in spoken German, sein, haben, modal verbs get used in their preterite forms. So you're supposed to fill these in with the sentence or with the verbs at the end of the sentence, right? So if you look at these first three, sollen, wollen, sein, that's modal, sein. So all of those are going to be used in their preterite forms. And then müssen is also a modal, so that's going to be used in its preterite form. Können is a modal, that's going to be used in its preterite form. Kommen is not a modal and is not haben oder sein, so it's going to be used in its perfect form. Finden is also not a modal or haben oder sein, so that's going to be used in its perfect. And sprechen is also not a modal or haben oder sein, so that's going to be in the perfect as well. So I'm going to do it. We'll do timeout. You'll pause the video, and then we can come back and go through this together. Okay, so here we are again. So the preterite of sollen is sollte, right? So ich sollte in die Bibliothek gehen, aber Michael oder Michael wollte, very similar forms. mit mir spazieren gehen. I should have gone to the library, but Michael wanted to walk with me. Es sein is the verb to be. How do we say to be in the past tense? That's was, right? So es war langweilig. So I guess Anna went for a date with Michael and it was boring is what I'm picking up on. Sarah, Akia musste. So with müssen, with all modal verbs in the preterite, you lose the umlaut if there is one, right? So musste nicht mit mir einkaufen gehen? Did he not have to go shopping with Mira? Anna. Können is another modal, right? And so we lose the umlaut and put that T ending on there. So Mira konnte nicht. Denn ihre Eltern. Okay, so here's our first verb that needs to go in the perfect. Kommen is a verb that indicates a change of position, right? There's traveling going on. There's movement here. So it takes sein as its helping verb. Also Mira konnte nicht, denn ihre Eltern sind zum Abendessen gekommen. Okay? Haha. Das... sorry, I'm not really following the story. Finden is also going to be in the perfect, but it takes haben and as its auxiliary verb, as its helping verb. So, das haben sie bestimmt toll gefunden. Right? So, kommen und finden are both strong. Sprechen is also strong. So, das weiß ich nicht. Ich habe heute nicht mit ihr gesprochen. So there it is. Distinctions between preterite and perfect. Okay? So once again, for the most part, preterite is used in writing. Perfect is used in speech, with the exception of modals haben and sein. Perfect has two verbal elements. Preterite has only one. Okay? But they basically mean the same thing. It's just a difference of context. Come with any questions, and I hope you have a good rest of the day. Talk to you then. Bye.